Recover is easily the most abused feature in FileMaker. You'll find it under the File menu down here at the bottom and called Recover. And you simply select your damaged database, one that you can't open, and it'll try to recover it for you. But there's a mistake that a lot of people make. Recover is not designed to fix your file. It's designed to open your file, your corrupt file, at all costs. So you can import the data into a clone of your database that isn't corrupted. And what we need by clone is, if you go to save a copy as, you'll see some choices: copy of current file, compacted copy, which means smaller, which means it takes all those blocks and compacts them. It rebuilds your tree structure. So it generally makes it smaller. And it's often recommended that you do this every once in a while, depending on how much smaller the file gets. And then there's a clone, no records. That's the one we're talking about right there. The clone will be just the structure, just what you see in managed database, the security, the layouts, just no data at all. So the idea behind this is to go to a backup that's never crashed, doesn't have a problem. You open it up, it works fine. You clone it, and then you recover your other database. You import the data in that, and you go with the clone version that's had the data imported. That way you don't lose any data. So recover, in order to open your file, because it may be acting weird, or it may not open at all. It deletes scripts that are suspect, any layouts that it can't understand that thinks it might be corrupt, fields, value lists, any kind of corruption in your file, just so it can be open. The recovered file may open up after that, but it may be unstable, as well as missing lots of pieces. You don't want to work with a recovered file. A lot of people just recover and go, oh, it's great. Okay, now it's working. They put that up on their server and they go on with their life. And that's not a good idea. You've done surgery on this file. It's likely to be messed up. And it may not be messed up right away. It may be messed up 6 months down the line, and you'll pay the price. Always go with the non-corrupted version. Recovers just to get your data back. That's the only reason it's there. Now, corruption typically happens when a file crashes. This can happen during development or on a server. So when I'm developing, I usually make backups, let's say once every hour. Just close it, duplicate it, give it a date on it or a timestamp so you know when you did it, and then open it up and continue working on it. That way, if it crashes, which doesn't happen very likely, if your computer's crashing a lot, you have a problem. But if it happens to crash or the power goes out while you're developing, you should get rid of it, lose all that development work, because you don't want to introduce any corruption. On your server, you need to make sure that you're always backing up. And that's pretty typical. I mean, when you set up server, it automatically sets up backups. But make sure those backups are done. You also need to make sure your server's running lean and mean. That means you need to have no unnecessary extensions or apps like file sharing or a virus checker that's automatically running in the background or an email server or who knows what. Try to keep it as lean as possible, because any update to anything, the operating system or that email server or who knows what, it might work fine, but then you update it and all of a sudden it starts crashing FileMaker, and then all of a sudden you need to go through this whole process of trying to fix it. So make sure and get a UPS on it so that if the power goes out, it doesn't crash. Very important stuff. And also, just a little side thing, people often restart their servers. Make sure you close all the FileMaker databases through the admin console. It's very easy to do, just close them, and that way they won't become corrupted that way, because you closed them improperly by restarting your server. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff to know about Recover. I think the summary is it's bad. Don't do it. It's not something you want to work with. Now, sometimes people have a corrupt layout. Now, that's pretty easy to fix. Just go into Manage Layouts, go to the layout, don't open it, just delete it. And so, in other words, if you're going to that layout and it crashes every time, then you could try making a backup of your database, go into the backup, try to delete the layout and see if that recreate the layout, see if that solves it. That's often something that can be, some minor surgery. Know where the problem is and fix it. You could also fix a corrupt record because I've seen that when I worked in technical support for 5 years. I saw a lot of corrupt records, and what we do is we go to the record just before the corrupt one because you probably know where it is. Let's say 9 is a corrupt record, we're on 8. Then go into layout mode, create yourself a new blank layout, just with no fields on it, just a blank layout, right? Based on the same table. And then you should be able to go to that record because there's no data displaying and delete it. That's a possibility. It could work. Let's take a look at I've opened up the web browser here. And it's over here. I think I threw it over there. There we go. So here's what you have inside the Claris help about recover files. Not much. You have to dive in really deep. So here's what I want to highlight right here. The recover command makes an aggressive attempt to reopen a damaged file. It is intended for data recovery, not file repair. Do not use the recover command as part of a routine file maintenance. FileMaker Pro attempts to recover as much of the information in a damaged file as possible and then creates a new recovery file. The original file is not deleted or replaced. So what that means is it's going to make a copy of it so you don't have to worry about your original being messed up. But really the most important is this first sentence. Don't do it as a way to fix that file. And if you dive deeper into the recovering files link, you'll see that it shows you how to do that. But what I really want to look at is the advanced file recovery options. You'll see that. Let's go back to FileMaker real quick and show you where that's at. Because when you go to recovery, actually what you need to do is you need to close your file. Let's get rid of this. And then you need to go to recover, select your file. It's going to call it invoices recovered as a default. We'll save it. It's going to go through and try to do all this stuff. And then you're going to get this recover log and the recovered file. This hopefully opens up so you can then import the data into your clone. Now, if you open up the recover log, it's kind of hard to read. It's not really well formatted unless you drop it on top of your FileMaker database, your FileMaker application, I'd say, and just save it, import it, and you'll see it's a lot easier to read. Now you can actually search it if you need to, but all the columns are there. It looks great. And what you're looking for is errors. And you can see there's a lot of zeros here. And you're looking to make sure that you didn't get a lot of errors here. Now, you're going to see a few errors in here, and I know my file's not corrupt, but sometimes you'll see these. Calculation modified, no big deal. This item changed, no big deal. Warning, problems are detected. This is just saying don't use this file. Don't use it going forward. That's all it's saying. So really there's no problems here, and you can even do a search for 0 and then look at just the errors you want to see. This is really not a problem with your file, so you wouldn't want to worry about that. So we'll go back into our invoices file. Actually, what we're going to do here, should say, is go into the recover again, and you'll see that there are check consistency. If you just want to check the consistency like this, okay, it's basically the same thing. See if there's any errors, but it doesn't actually try to fix the file. It just checks for consistency. So it's basically the same thing as recovery. It says 0 bad blocks. So you're pretty safe there. And then there we go, recover. Now you also have advanced options. It's pretty cool. It hasn't always been here. I'm going to come down to the end here and see bypass startup script and layout. Requires admin privileges. That means if you get stuck in some kind of looping script that you can't get out of on open, you can say bypass that startup script and it won't do it. If there's anything going with it, it's great because you can just say copy the file blocks as is, right? Which is just copying it. It does nothing to it. You can turn all this stuff off if you want and just say bypass that. And it'll go ahead and allow you to open up that file, bypass that open script, remove this errant code, and go from there. Then you also have same thing as a compacted copy. Why they threw it in here, I don't know why, but maybe it makes it more accessible because it's in different places. But here's the default. Remember what we did when we came in here. I think it'll probably put it back in. Here's the default. This is a recover, doing a full recover. Scan the blocks and rebuild, drop invalid blocks. That's right. It's going to go ahead and delete stuff. Scan record data and rebuild fields and tables. That's a little scary. Who knows what it's going to do? Scan and rebuild scripts, layouts, etc. It doesn't say anything about deleting, but it could delete that stuff. Rebuild field indexes. That sometimes people like to do that as just the only option. Copy this and then turn all that other stuff except rebuild the index. Because often you can get, I've seen more common getting a corrupt index where you're doing a pop-up menu or a find and it's not finding the stuff or the choice is not in the pop-up menu. And people often go into manage database, turn off the index, close manage database, go back in, turn the index back on, and that will rebuild the index as well. That's one way to do it. This will just rebuild all of them. And then delete cache settings. These are all things that could cause problems. And the ones that are really intrusive though are these first two here. These ones are the ones that are going to be deleting stuff and aggressively trying to open your file. So you can go in there and do that if you want, but I've been working with FileMaker a long time, and I've never really seen any of my files corrupted. I've worked in tech support for 5 years, and I saw quite a few, probably a dozen or so, and that's because people didn't keep track of their file. They were crashing all the time. They didn't make backups. They're doing all kinds of things, and if you find yourself in that situation, right? And we come back down here, open this up, and you've tried to recover it, you can't recover, you can't get your data back. Well, there is a file recovery service from Claris. It's $500 per file, and they'll go through it and manually adjust it so they can open up so then you can then import the data into a clone. So this is a last resort right here to do. And it's going to probably take quite a few. I don't know if it says how long it's going to take, but it could tell, yeah, 3 to 6 weeks. So you really don't want to go this route because then you're not using your file for 3 to 6 weeks. So the story, the moral of the story is, make sure you do backups. Make sure you have a lean, mean server machine. It's just running FileMaker. And you'll never have that problem because I've never had that problem because I read the riot act to all my clients and they follow the rules. And if they don't, I've seen it before where people just call in the tech support and say, oh my goodness, I can't open this file. Well, where's your backup? Well, we don't have a backup. you know so make sure you do those backup. That's going to save you. You may not have to use it you know ever in 10 years, but one time you need it, it's going to be really helpful. And make sure you use FileMaker's backups. And if you want to back up the backups, back up FileMaker's backups. Don't back up the original files on the server because you could corrupt those files because they're running. You need to make sure you back up the backups. So hopefully that'll help you out. It's not every last piece of information about Recover, but I wanted to dispel a lot of the myths that it's going to fix your file, and it will not fix your file.